Well, joining me now is Michael Berry. He is Director of Military Affairs for First Liberty Institute and just does a great job. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You know, the president last night, we just played this clip as if he were extending an olive branch, you know, on the whole issue of COVID, the vaccine mandates, the mask, all this government overreach. But the administration's walk is not matching the president's talk. I mean, just this week, on Monday, First Liberty secured a victory for Navy SEALs.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, nothing cures a pandemic quite like midterm elections, it seems. But no, I mean, to your point, Tony, we've been fighting the administration tooth and nail, step by step, against this vaccine mandate, specifically as it applies to people in our military, people serving our nation. You know, I heard your remarks about Ukraine with Senator Rubio. Obviously, at a time like this, and with all the threats to America and American interests around the world, you would think that the Department of Defense would want to be welcoming people with the type of elite skills that our Navy SEALs have. Instead, they're continuing to try to kick them out because of their religious beliefs. And so First Liberty's been fighting that. We actually secured a victory at the district court, a preliminary injunction, which is an order from the judge telling the Navy, stop punishing them. You can't kick them out because of their religious beliefs. The Department of Justice, who's representing the Navy, appealed that. They filed an emergency appeal to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And just a few days ago, the Fifth Circuit upheld the district court's ruling. So again, delivered another victory for First Liberty and our Navy SEALs.
But you would think if the administration, as the president said last night, you know, hey, there are things that divide us, we can be unified going forward. You would think now with the science showing that the vaccine is not the cure-all. In fact, it doesn't prevent people from getting it. We see all these breakthrough cases. We actually now have studies that show that natural immunity, those who have had the virus, actually provide greater elasticity in terms of protecting against future variants. We're talking about young, healthy individuals. They're at a minimal risk if they contract COVID because they're in the military, they're in shape. I mean, this makes no sense.
To me, one of the best illustrations of just how insane the administration has become on this, one of the people who was in the audience last night at the State of the Union, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin,
right,
who is admittedly vaccinated and I think triple boosted, right, and has worn both a mask and sort of a plastic face shield, right? So vaccinated, triple boosted, masked and shielded, and yet he still got COVID. And this was the kicker. The Department of Defense issued a statement that said that the secretary was going to be performing his duties remotely. All right. Well, boy, wouldn't it sure be nice if they would allow that same privilege to members of our military, like our Navy SEALs and many others who, if they get COVID, that's one of the arguments we've made is, look, if the Secretary of Defense is able to perform his duties remotely, why can't members of the military do theirs remotely? And, you know, there's this old-fashioned notion that, you know, you're supposed to do as your leadership does, or when you're in a position of leadership, you're supposed to set the example.
You know, Mike, this is really, and it goes beyond the military, but it's the issue of fear. And this is you know, if anything, our military should be communicating courage, strength in the face of adversity. And I actually found it a very interesting transition of the president in his speech last night, where he was talking about Ukraine and the heroic actions of President Zelensky, who quite frankly is, you know, a modern day Braveheart, I think. But his stand, and then he goes to the economic pain of Americans. We're suffering nothing compared to the Ukrainian people, but we're gripped with this fear that we've hidden in our houses for the last 2 years. And it's time, I think, for the leadership of this country to boldly stand and say, look, we cannot hide from this. And I do think, and I know it's not the subject of our segment here, but I think there's an underlying spiritual issue here, a fear of the unknown. And this is where I believe I'm very concerned about our military. It does tie into this segment. Very concerned about our military because I see this driving out many men and women of faith from our military, which historically have provided the bulk of men and women who are willing to lay down their lives for others.
You're exactly right. It does tie into the SEALs case, this notion of fear, right? Our nation and especially our leadership, our elected leaders being driven by fear. And the fear is this, right? And it ties into what's happening in Ukraine, because if I know people, as I know you do as well, who lived in Eastern Europe during the times of totalitarian regimes. Religious freedom was always one of the first flashpoints in those regimes, because the one thing a totalitarian or an authoritarian will never tolerate is people who say, I submit to a higher authority than whoever this government official or this dictator is. And I think it's that same spirit. It might not be to the same degree, but it's that same spirit that's happening in our military when they realize that the people who are saying, I don't want this vaccine, are the people who say, because I have a religious objection. It's my deepest held conviction in my conscience, in my soul, and it tells me I can't get this vaccine. And I don't care how many stars you have on your collar or what your title is. You can't order me to do something that violates my beliefs. And the military says, we will not tolerate that. We're going to kick you out. We're going to punish you. And that's exactly what's happening.
I actually think that's a really good analogy, a parallel, because it hasn't been talked about a lot, but I think that's part of Putin's problem with Ukraine. Ukraine is the country in Eastern Europe that sends out more missionaries than any other country in Europe. I mean, there is a strong, vibrant church there. And I actually was involved. I actually trained some of the first law enforcement officers that came out of Eastern Europe when the wall came down back in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was working with the State Department. I'll never forget having Polish officers come in who had never seen a Bible. And we gave them, I gave them personally, this was an issue with the government, but it was my personally provided Bibles that I gave to these in their language. And I have never seen such a response. And I think that's in part what is driving the Ukrainians to stand so firmly. And I think it's the same element in our military. And if we lose that, I am very concerned about our national security, the future of our military and our country, if we drive those people of faith out.
This is about the soul of our military and the soul of our country, I would even say, because if somebody who is in a position of authority, right? You've served in the military, I've served. We both know that if somebody in a position of authority says, I'm ordering you to do this, and the person says, well, wait a minute. First of all, I think that violates the Constitution. Second, that violates my religious beliefs. And the person in authority says, I don't care. Do it or else. You've now shattered whatever trust exists between the superior and the subordinate. And that trust, that special bond of trust, is absolutely essential for a military to function. And if we lose that, we're going to lose the soul of our military, and we're going to be left with nothing more than a hollowed out shell of what we once knew.
Well, Michael Berry, appreciate what you do and First Liberty does on behalf of our nation's military. Final question for you, because we're up against the end of the program, but based on the president's comments last night and the polling and the trending, do you anticipate a change by this administration toward the military?
Well, if they don't do it voluntarily, First Liberty is going to force them to do it through litigation, as we have been. We know we continue to win these cases, right? Not just First Liberty. There are others that have been filed. They've been citing our case favorably. And so we know that there are cracks in the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense's foundation, their legal defense that they've been putting up. And so we're going to continue to pound away until we get victory. And look, if the president was smart and he should be able to see the writing on the wall and say, you know what? I'm going to claim victory here. I'm going to lift the mandate and I'm going to be magnanimous about it. And then we can all move on.
Well, if he doesn't and you continue to pound, we're there with you. We appreciate all that you do. Thanks so much for hosting us today.
Absolutely.
And folks, thank you for joining us as well. Always great to be with you. Check out the website, TonyPerkins.com, for more info. And until next time, I leave you once again with the encouraging words of the Apostle Paul, found in Ephesians 6, where he says, you've done everything you can do. When you've prayed, prepared, and taken your stand, by all means, keep standing.